Ikuto was an ugly moron who ran away from his abusive father only to be caught in a massive storm. However, everything changed when he washed up on a mysterious island filled with freaky baddies who all compete to clean their rusty holes with his pipe. After he fell overboard during one of Poseidon's tantrums, the ship's crew didn't bother risking their lives to save him. Ikuto tried to swim after the ship, but the waves said, "Not today," and as he began sinking to the bottom of the ocean, he regretted running away from home. The following morning, he was fished out of the water by a girl named Suzu, whose attempt to resuscitate him almost made him wish he was still sleeping with the fishes. She eventually took him to her village chief, and when Suzu asked why he had a tail in front, the granny confirmed he was a guy, prompting half the village to storm the place since they hadn't seen one in a while. After she chased them away, Ikuto regained consciousness, and the old woman revealed that he was on an island full of women who had been stranded there for years. She also mentioned that they had no contact with the outside world, and Ikuto instantly grew depressed. The woman just told him to cheer up and asked Suzu to take him in until they could figure things out. Later, at Suzu's house, she told Ikuto to take a bath, and while he was soaking, she came in to wash his back, shocking him beyond words. Nevertheless, he allowed her, but then he almost lost all his blood when she asked him to wash her back. Suddenly, Suzu's self-proclaimed rival, Ayane, bursted out of the water, and his situation worsened, causing him to black out. Later, as he walked around the village, all the thirsty women began chasing him to taste his sausage, and after Suzu intervened, the chief came and revealed to Ikuto that everyone wanted him because he was the only guy on the island. Shocked, Ikuto immediately ran and tried to get off the island by boat, but a whirlpool sent him back ashore. The old woman told him that it was impossible to get off the island because of the whirlpools. Ikuto hated the word impossible, as his dad always said it to him whenever he wanted to remind him that he was useless. So he became determined to prove them wrong. After repeatedly failing, he eventually found an opening, but then an orca whale showed up. Annoyed, he threw his oar at it and it retaliated by overturning his boat. As he sank, Suzu immediately dove into the water to save him, and to his surprise, the orca helped too. Suzu then revealed that the orca had been trying to protect him, as the path he tried to take led to the largest whirlpool which would have ended him. Ikuto apologized to the whale and finally agreed that leaving the island was impossible. As he lay down talking about how he'd never worked so hard in his life, he noticed that Suzu's chest binder was soaked through, causing his virgin instinct to activate. Later, Suzu told Ikuto the story of how all the men on the island were swept away by a large wave 12 years ago during a fishing tournament. According to the chief, the tsunami only occurred every 100 years, so Ikuto was 88 years away from regaining his freedom. Later, as he lay in bed thinking of the situation, Ayane tried to kidnap him again. Thankfully, Suzu walked in just in time, and while she was fighting Ayane, poor Ikuto got caught in the middle. However, his blood loss was a reaction to getting assaulted by Suzu's melons, and since she didn't know this, she angrily threw the dummy Ikuto at Ayane, sending her flying out of the house. She then rushed to check on Ikuto, but then realized that the entire house was surrounded by the freaky villagers desperate for Ikuto's milk. The chief also showed up out of nowhere and screamed at everyone to put their hormone monsters on timeout, after which, she announced that there would be a husband-catching hide-and-seek tournament the next day to decide who would get Ikuto. Everyone showed up as soon as the sun rose, and after ignoring Ikuto's complaints about being the grand prize, the old woman revealed the rules of the game. Ikuto was then given a head start, but without Suzu and her pet pig, Tenkatsu, he would have been caught. As he continued running, he didn't notice Rin watching him from the trees, but Ayane did, and since she wasn't aware of the competition, she didn't think much of it. Just then, Suzu appeared behind her, using her as a springboard to reach Rin and stop her from capturing Ikuto. Surprisingly, Ikuto still had no idea that Suzu was acting as his guardian angel and continued running until he ran into Chikage. She offered to help him hide since she wasn't into him, and Ikuto accepted, not knowing that she planned to capture him for science. Unfortunately for her, Suzu had tampered with the trap, so when she set it off, she was the one who got caught. Her loud cry gave Ikuto's location away, so he began running again, and as Suzu started taking the girls out, he accidentally ended up in a Looney Tunes situation. After he and Tonkatsu had gone over the waterfall, Yukino showed up with a large bird and caught them before Suzu could. Ikuto wasn't good with heights, so he began squirming, causing the bird to drop him into the eastern forest, which was infested with man-eating plants and a panda. Thankfully, Suzu arrived just in time and saved Ikuto from being whacked like a mole. However, the panda tried to retaliate, prompting Ikuto to push Suzu out of the way and take the hit, which sent him flying for the umpteenth time. He landed on a tree by the western cliff, and thanks to Yukino's loud mouth, everyone knew where to find him. Ayane was trampled upon during the mad dash, and when she got back up, she saw the competition banner and grew pissed that she hadn't been informed. So she got her revenge by knocking everyone out with sleeping gas and hitting Ikuto with another dart. She then waited for Suzu to show up so she could make her watch as she claimed Ikuto for himself. Curious, Ikuto asked why she was always competing against Suzu, and Ayane revealed that it was because the melon goddess blessed Suzu. As she began trying to make her point, Ikuto tried to escape, so she chased after him, only to be outsmarted and fall into the sea. Ikuto then began celebrating his victory, but the chief showed up and rained on his parade. After everyone returned to her house, she announced that Suzu was the winner, since he touched her in the eastern forest. On the bright side, Suzu wasn't interested in marrying Ikuto and said he should choose his future wife, which everyone agreed with. The next day, Ikuto insisted on helping Suzu with the chores, but the lazy bum couldn't even carry the buckets properly and kept complaining about how he missed modern society. Suddenly, Rin showed up carrying a large container of water, and when she walked away, Suzu revealed that Rin was the strongest person on the island. Refusing to accept that a sleeper-build muscle mummy was stronger than him, Ikuto picked up the pace, only to end up walking past Suzu's house and tripping over a rock. When the girls caught up with him, Suzu suddenly sensed that they were being watched and threw her bucket at a nearby tree. From it emerged a ninja who traced the outline of Ikuto's body on the ground with her throwing stars. Her name was Mikoto, and she was Rin's younger sister. Apparently, she'd come to thank Ikuto for stealing all the attention from Rin, but she still threatened to chop his sausage if he tried to pull Rin too. Rin quickly set her straight with a kick on the head, but Ikuto was still scared of the girl. Eventually, he and Suzu went to finish the house chores, and despite being bad at everything, Ikuto didn't give up. When the chores were done, they went into the village to help out, and Ikuto tried to, when he learned they were harvesting sweet potatoes. After embarrassing his bloodline for a few minutes, he accepted Suzu's offer to help and was shocked when they pulled out giant sweet potatoes. However, after he looked around, he realized that the only small item on that farm was in pants and went mute.
Emotional, damn it!
They moved on to other tasks, leaving Ikuto wondering who had signed off on the island's creation. Later, on their way back home, they ran into Yukino and Chikage, who had been waiting all day for Suzu to arrive so they could pick mushrooms. As expected, the mushrooms weren't regular-sized, and when Ikuto tried to help, he was eaten by a carnivorous plant that pretended to be a mushroom. Fortunately, it spat him out and died almost immediately, as that was its nature, so Ikuto asked the girls how to spot the real mushrooms. Suzu said the real ones were black and shiny, but that wasn't so, and Ikuto got swallowed again. The girls then advised him to leave the harvesting to them, but Ikuto refused, and when he heard Yukino say it was impossible, he doubled his efforts. At the end of the day, he didn't pick a single real mushroom and felt like the world's greatest failure. While he was sulking away from the girls, Rin showed up carrying a big log. She then decided it was her chance to score points with him by having him touch her plots. When the others arrived, he was bleeding from his nose and had to apologize for being way too cultured. Yukino said it was Rin's fault for acting like a low-budget succubus, but Rin acted as if she didn't know what she was talking about. Suddenly, she spotted the earthworms Yukino's bird had picked and began freaking out. Yukino, on the other hand, began chasing her with the worms, so Ikuto stepped in to protect Rin. Later at the beach, Ikuto commended Suzu for being so hardworking and reliable. Unlike him, who was basically another Sakura and couldn't repay her for saving his life, Suzu told him not to think like that, as he was already doing more for her than he knew. Before his arrival, she always returned home to an empty house after a hard day's work, but now, she had him, and it finally felt like she had a family again. A few days later, while Ikuto and Suzu were out, Suzu fell off the side of the mountain and accidentally broke a statue used to trap an evil spirit. Ikuto didn't believe in spirits and told her she was overreacting, so he mistakenly reassembled the statue and left with Suzu. Since they were chatting, they didn't notice the statue's eyes glowing. That night, as Ikuto tried to convince Suzu that the supernatural wasn't real, she noticed a spirit watching them and screamed. The next day, when he explained to the others why Suzu was sticking to him like glue, they confirmed that the legend of the trapped spirit was true, but Ikuto said they had all been brainwashed. He then tried to convince Suzu to relax, but Ayana decided to mess with her and smirked when Suzu began panicking. Rin scolded her, but she was having too much fun, and began telling Suzu that she would soon be dragged into hell. So, Suzu snapped and tossed her into the air. That night, she returned to scare Suzu, but began to rethink her actions when she heard Suzu tell Ikuto that fear was a double-edged sword for her. When her mom was still alive, she'd hold Suzu's hand whenever Suzu got scared, but now that her mom was gone, Suzu felt lonely when she did. Ikuto consoled her and promised to be by her side from now on, so she would never feel lonely again. Seeing them hug annoyed Ayana, so she decided to move on with her plan, only to get spooked by the spirit. When Ikuto rushed outside and found her, she told him that the spirit was real, but he didn't believe her. At that moment, he heard Suzu scream and rush back inside to find the spirit attached to her. Ayane came in shortly after and tried to exorcise the spirit, but she was no jujutsu sorcerer. In the end, Ikuto beat the spirit into submission and, after lecturing it on the dangers of scaring people, promised to tell everyone that it wasn't a bad spirit. The girls were so shocked they couldn't speak, and after he bade the spirit goodbye as if it were an old friend, they began questioning everything they knew about the supernatural. Another day, while Ikuto and Suzu were out fishing, Yukino suddenly fell from a cliff and landed on Ikuto. All the animals in the area rushed to help Yukino, while Suzu attempted to give Ikuto mouth-to-mouth. Thankfully, he woke up before that happened, saving himself from another almost death situation. Yukino also woke up, so Ikuto and Suzu went to sit with her and the animal, and she explained that she'd tripped while picking grapes. To Ikuto's confusion, the girls began conversing with the animals, so he asked whether Dr. Dolittle was their ancestor. This time, the girls were the ones who got confused, as it was apparently normal to speak to animals. Even the animals could write, and Ikuto became convinced that the plot gods had been on premium grass when they drafted that plot line. Suddenly, Suzu asked about Kuma Kuma, Yukino's bear, and she said they had been together while she was picking grapes. She figured the bear had wandered off to eat something and proposed that they split up to search for her. She obviously picked Ikuto as her partner, leaving Suzu with the animals, and a few minutes later, they found some bear tracks. However, the bear that made them wasn't Yukino's bear, and Ikuto got slapped by it for staring at it too much. They then continued their search, but none of the bears they encountered was Yukino's bear, so they decided to take a break. While they were snacking on fruit, Yukino admitted she had scolded her bear earlier that day because it had eaten all the grape jam in the storeroom. Ikuto didn't think that was enough to make the bear run away and asked how long Yukino and Kuma had been friends. Yukino said it had been a few years, but they spent all their time together, which was why she was certain that the bear was scared wherever she was. When she started crying, Ikuto picked her up and declared they would continue their search. When they still couldn't find her, Ikuto drew a picture and tried to show it to the other bears. After a few failed attempts, they finally got a lead, but the path there was through an old bridge and Ikuto refused to set foot on it. Yukino, on the other hand, didn't mind and ran ahead, asking Ikuto to wait for her. The next second, the bridge began to fall apart, so Ikuto rushed to save Yukino, only for the rest of the bridge to collapse under their combined weight. However, they were pulled back up almost immediately and landed in a tree. When Yukino saw that their savior was Kuma Kuma, she rushed to embrace her. Suzu and the others also arrived at that moment, and to Ikuto's surprise, he could understand what the animals were saying. The animals were proud of him, so they gave him a nickname and called him their new bestie. Ikuto felt things were moving too fast and ran away, but the animals followed him anyway. A day later, while Ikuto and Suzu were out, an earthquake struck. So Suzu screamed like a banshee and ran home, dragging Ikuto behind her. By the time they got home, the shaking had stopped, so Suzu decided to bathe but discovered the bath was empty. Since all the village's water came from a single source, Ikuto worked with the girls to build a makeshift bath behind Suzu's house. Once it was hot enough, they took turns using it, then relaxed at Suzu's house and talked about the lack of water. They felt it was the worst thing that had ever happened and commented that life would be depressing until they got the water back. However, Ikuto disagreed, saying they didn't really need to bathe to be clean. That statement earned him looks, which they paired with insults, calling him worse than a pig, and Ikuto's confidence disappeared. They didn't even care and continued talking about the situation, saying it might take a while to fix things since they all had busy schedules that week. Hours later, while Suzu was fast asleep, Ikuto decided to go up the mountain and fix the water issue. So when Suzu woke up the next morning, all she saw was Ikuto's folded futon and a note telling her where he'd gone. The path there wasn't easy, and Ikuto even fell when a piece of the mountain broke off. Thankfully, Yukino and her bird caught him in time and dropped him off at the hot spring, where he promised to have the problem fixed by night. Just then, Suzu and Rin arrived, as Rin had gotten permission from her bosses to come fix the water problem. When they opened the hot spring well, they found a lot of dirt, and thankfully, Yukino returned with some animals to help them. So they connected a rope, and Ikuto went first, only to look up and see Suzu's plot cover, so he slipped and fell. A while later, they began shoveling the dirt into a basket and called Rin and Yukino to pull it out of the well. However, another earthquake occurred, and they both fell deeper into the well. They ended up in an underground cave, but since the path that had fallen through was now blocked with rocks, they decided to find another way out. Suzu's foot was hurt, and even though she tried to tough it out, Ikuto still insisted on carrying her. After walking for a while, they found an opening in another part of the cave, but it was too high to reach. While looking around for another way, Ikuto noticed something and walked into the water to confirm his suspicion. A rock had blocked the hot spring's flow, so he began trying to remove it with his shovel. The continuous striking of metal against rock awoke a sea beast, but Ikuto didn't know and continued working. Even when his shovel broke, he refused to give up and began using the handle, which also broke into pieces. Suddenly, the cave began to tremble, and a spray of hot spring water hit Ikuto in the face, and the stone wall collapsed. Ikuto rushed to grab Suzu, but the water filled the place up quickly, forcing Suzu to let go of his hand. He had to dive down to find her, and as he began pulling her back up, they spotted the monster, but it paid them no attention. Up top, Rin and Yukino were attempting a rescue when another spot opened up, and water shot out of it. Ikuto and Suzu were on top of it, and Suzu began crying because she'd been scared for Ikuto's life, so he apologized. Days later, Suzu took Ikuto to the southern forest to meet her master, who she said was the lord of that forest. Ikuto grew worried when the lord of the east tried to beat him up the other day. However, when he saw that Suzu's master was a small, two-tailed cat, he relaxed. The cat, equally ignoring his blatant disrespect for it, explained to Suzu that he had summoned them to help him retain his title as lord on the day of the survival game. Ikuto didn't know the details, but he agreed to help out, and on the game day, the cats and dogs stood on opposite sides of the forest. Their mission was simple. Whichever team drew 2 whiskers on the opposite side's team leader would win. A few minutes after the game began, Ikuto and Suzu encountered their first obstacle, banana peels. While trying to maneuver it, a dog appeared and tried to draw on their faces, but they outsmarted it and continued on their way. While running, they noticed that Tonkatsu was missing and grew worried that the dogs had captured him. However, he turned up a few seconds later. Instead of moving on, Suzu decided to have lunch, prompting Ikuto to ask whether she knew how survival games worked. The next moment, they were ambushed by more dogs who performed for them before running circles around them to confuse them. Ikuto then whispered to Suzu, and, on cue, they stuck out their brushes, forcing the dogs to stop. They then continued running and, after marking every dog they encountered, reached the hill where the dog leader was. Surprisingly, Ayana and her sister Makshi showed up to block their paths, as they owed the dogs a favor. While they fought, some dogs made it to the cat's hill and drew on the master two-tailed cat's face, claiming victory for themselves. However, it was revealed almost immediately that the one they marked was Tonkatsu. The cat master had disguised himself as Tonkatsu, and before the dog could react, he drew on his face. The master then told Ikuto that one must first deceive one's allies if they wanted to deceive their enemies. The most surprising part was that the dogs and cats seemed to get along very well, and he was told that was the spirit of sportsmanship. That same week, the whole gang set off for the northern forest to show Ikuto the only sakura tree on the island. Ikuto assumed it would be a quick walk, but was shocked to discover that they had to split up to avoid drawing the attention of the forest's lord. Machi asked them to pick lots to decide their groups, and poor Ikuto ended up with a crazy girl. She made him climb a mountain, and when they reached the top, she forced him to bungee jump. He was safe in the end, but he was left traumatized, and when they regrouped with the others, they immediately noticed it. Nevertheless, they continued going and were shocked when they bumped into the lord of the forest. But he was a pretty chill guy, and he even told them which route to take to get to the tree faster. The only problem they encountered was the broken bridge, but thanks to Rin's carpentry skills, they managed to build a temporary bridge and cross the river. At this point, Ikuto was convinced the tree wasn't worth all the trouble. However, when he finally saw it, he retracted his statement on the spot and enjoyed a chaotic lunch with the girls under it. That weekend, Ikuto and Suzu went to Chikage's house and were welcomed by a pink elephant named Panako, who, according to Suzu, was the prettiest lady on the island. Ikuto didn't see it, and when he tried to force himself to, he almost developed a migraine. Panako mistook his stare for admiration and grew so embarrassed that she smacked him into the wall, forgetting he wasn't built like her. A few minutes later, Chikage showed up wearing only an apron, and Ikuto's body got rid of his excess blood. She then changed into different outfits, and for the last one, Suzu decided to join her. Eventually, she put on a short maid's outfit, and Ikuto curiously asked where she'd gotten the idea to cosplay. Chikage showed him some books and magazines that had been swept to the island on stormy nights and took them to a storage room containing other things she found. Ikuto was impressed to see that she gathered quite a collection. However, it was the girls who grew surprised when he told them what a rice cooker and a microwave were used for. They immediately asked him to show them how it worked, but he told them that without electricity, almost all the items in the room would be useless. Chikage was beyond crushed by the revelation, but she consoled herself with the fact that Ikuto was before her and she could finally study him. So when he and Suzu said they were leaving, she convinced them to stay for dinner and rushed to the kitchen to prepare something Ikuto was familiar with, using the cookbooks from her collection. When the food was ready, Chikage brought it to them, and Ikuto's disappointment hung over him like a cloud. She made a hamburger by slapping tofu between 2 rice crackers, and the ramen tasted like all of Ikuto's failed dreams. The octopus in the takoyaki was very much alive, and it spread ink everywhere. The only acceptable dish she made was the curry rice, and Ikuto ate it with joy. Shortly after dinner, Ikuto and Suzu told Chikage they were going home, but the girl still didn't want them to leave. So she hit the octopus, causing it to spray them with its ink. The pair now had no choice but to stay and bathe in her house, and Chikage was happy. Ikuto didn't expect the girls to go in with him, so he almost died when they began undressing. While they washed their bodies, Chikage asked Suzu if that was Ikuto's usual reaction to seeing her, and she confirmed that it was. She said she didn't understand why he opposed bathing with her, which intrigued Chikage even more. However, she was suddenly distracted by Suzu's plots and decided to study them. Later, a tired Suzu came to inform Ikuto that the bathroom was free, but neither of them knew that Chikage was hiding in there. When peeping from a distance didn't work, she got into the water and swam closer, but Panako showed up, offering to wash Ikuto's back. To Chikage's surprise, he allowed the elephant and seemed more relaxed than when she and Suzu tried to bathe with him. The more she watched them, the more she found herself admiring Ikuto's features, but she didn't know why. When he got back into the water, she moved closer so she could stare at his body properly. Unfortunately, Panako jumped into the water at that moment and landed on her. It wasn't until she stuck her hand out of the water that they noticed her and rushed her to bed. While Panako watched over her, Ikuto and Suzu lay in bed, but Suzu was pissed at Ikuto for letting Panako bathe with him. Ikuto pointed out that Panako was an elephant, but Suzu argued that a female was a female regardless of their race. She also said she wouldn't speak to him again until he agreed to bathe with her, and the boy was stunned. The next day, when Rin went to bathe in the river, Tonkatsu suddenly showed up. Ikuto was not far behind, and when he saw Rin in her waterfall chic, his body reacted as it always did. Rin also screamed and told him to get lost, but instead, he grabbed her shoulders and thanked her for reacting like a normal girl. In response, she sent him flying with a punch, then got dressed and found him where he'd landed. They both apologized for what happened, and she leaned in to check his head for injuries. Later, as they walked back to the village, Rin asked Ikuto to drop by her workplace the next day to help out, and he agreed. When Ikuto got home later, Suzu noticed the bump on his head and asked what had happened. The boy refused to tell her and quickly changed the topic, so Suzu let it go. During dinner, Ikuto informed Suzu about his arrangement with Rin, and Suzu insisted on accompanying him. The next day, Ikuto and Suzu arrived early at Rin's family workshop, and after he was introduced to everyone, Rin led him away to show him the ropes. As Suzu stood watching them, Mikoto slid next to her and began planting ideas in her head. To her annoyance, Suzu was as dense as my ex, so Mikoto snitched on Ikuto, saying his head bump had been given to him by Rin because he saw her bathing. Suzu went quiet the moment she heard this, so Mikoto tried to recruit her as her second pair of eyes, but one of the workers dragged her off to start working. As everyone began working, Rin tried to show Ikuto how to use a hammer, but the idiot got distracted by her plots and turned into a blood fountain again. Once he lost control, he observed what Rin was doing, but then she accidentally hammered her finger. He rushed over to check on her, and their closeness made Mikoto seethe with anger. However, they didn't even sense her murderous intent as the two were having one of those short-lived romantic moments. Suddenly, Ikuto's spidey senses came alive, alerting him to the danger, and he managed to move just in time to avoid the hammer Mikoto threw at him. The girl then pretended it was an accident, but came closer to Ikuto and threatened to throw something bigger at him if he didn't start practicing social distancing with her sister. Ikuto tried his best to comply, but the universe had other plans, and Mikoto threw shooting stars at him. His reaction prompted Rin to believe he was annoyed with her, so she tried to get back in his good graces, only to end up causing minor accidents for herself. Embarrassed, she ran off, and when Ikuto tried to go after her, Mikoto dropped water containers on him. She then caused the containers to spill their contents and tried to pretend it was an accident, but Ikuto called her a liar. At this, she switched up and challenged him to a duel. Neither refused to back down, and they ended up building the entire house themselves and at record speed. Later, during dinner, Rin was sulking because she didn't get to show off her skills to Ikuto. However, when he complimented the meal she made, the butterflies in her tummy returned, and they had another moment. Suzu felt left out watching them, and even more so when Risa began teasing Ikuto, saying he would make the best son-in-law. Just then, Mikoto showed up with a watermelon which she'd stuffed with some fireworks, and everything turned chaotic. A few days later, a heavy downpour kept Suzu and Ikuto from leaving the house, so Suzu suggested they play shogi to pass the time. As they played, Ikuto pointed out that it was the first time they had done anything other than work at home. Suzu said it was because it was the first time it had rained since he came there, and that the last storm had destroyed a lot of things. At this, Ikuto speculated that there was a link between the storm and his arrival. He also wondered whether the whirlpool weakened during storms, allowing people to drift onto the island. Suzu went quiet after he said this, and it took a few seconds of his calling out to her before she responded, which worried him. A little while later, Suzu won the game again, forcing Ikuto to admit that he knew nothing about shogi. Suzu said she'd been playing it with her mom since she was little, and the look on her face made him think she was sad. Suzu then went to prepare lunch, while Ikuto sat by the door with Tonkatsu. He couldn't help but wonder how lonely Suzu had been on rainy days after her mom died, and it made him sad. Suzu noticed his sudden change and came closer to ask if he was okay. He swore that he was, but she didn't believe him and kept staring into his eyes, looking for the truth. Suddenly, the front door opened, and Ayana teasingly asked if they were finally about to do married couple stuff, which made Ikuto panic. After everyone had come in, they gave Yukino the things they brought for her, and she told them that she would make some extra food for them. Ikuto just observed everything in silence as he'd realized that Suzu had never been truly alone because the girl always came through for her. Later, after everyone had left, Suzu and Ikuto sat outside, and she admitted that Ikuto's presence prevented her from feeling lonely like she usually did when the girls went home on rainy days. Ikuto grew flustered upon hearing this, and when Suzu started singing, he listened quietly, enjoying the melody. When she finished, she told him that her mother had said Suzu would wear her old wedding dress on her wedding day. Ikuto immediately imagined himself as the groom, and a creepy smile spread across his face. Confused, Suzu asked what was the matter, but he swore there wasn't any and tried to back away from her. A few nights later, Ikuto woke up to find Suzu sitting in the water tank. She was babbling nonsense, so he had the village chief come check on her in the morning, and the woman confirmed that Suzu had a fever. She then asked him to get some ice to lower Suzu's temperature, which surprised him since they had no electricity or refrigerator. At that time, Kuma Kuma and Kamo Kamo were shaving the block of ice to make honey-glazed, shaved ice, which they shared with a woman who resembled Yukino. When Ikuto showed up looking for ice, the woman tackled him to the ground and began speaking to him, as if they had been besties their entire lives. Yukino arrived at that moment, and it was then that Ikuto realized she was Yukino's mother, Kagami. Yukino said she'd been looking everywhere for her, and her mom admitted that she'd gone off to eat some snacks. At this, Yukino called her immature, and Kagami hoisted her by her collar to remind her who the adult was. She then invited Ikuto to hang out with her, but he declined, saying he'd just come to get some ice for Suzu. Yukino offered to show him where the ice was kept, but was shocked when they got there and found nothing. It was then that her mother admitted that she and the animals had used it to make shaved ice. Seeing this, Yukino said they had to climb to the top of the tallest mountain to get some more ice, and Kagami insisted on tagging along. When Yukino refused, the woman bullied her into changing her mind, and Ikuto felt sorry for the peepsqueak. A few hours later, Ikuto and the others reached the snowy part of the mountain, and Kagame insisted they have a snowball fight. Yukino said it wasn't the right time, but then changed her mind and began attacking Ikuto. Eventually, the group finally did what they had come for, but everyone except Ikuto wanted to wait out the storm. So he went ahead without them and ended up falling off the side of the mountain, but a snow pile broke his fall. Back at the mountain's peak, a worried Yukino ran out of the igloo before anyone could stop her. Kagami and the animals chased after her, but they all suddenly caught a chill and sneezed loudly, triggering an avalanche. Ikuto had just made it back to the cart when he got swept up in the avalanche with the others. They were then thrown off the mountain in a giant snowball and landed right in front of Machi. The girl helped herself to some of the ice, and when Ikuto saw it melting, he grabbed some and ran home. Kagami knew he wouldn't make it in time, so she asked the bird for a lift, and in a few short minutes he was home. The chief scolded him for returning late, so Ikuto explained that he'd gone up the mountain to get the ice. Sadly, all that was left was just a small clump. Just then, a fully recovered Suzu rushed out, and relief washed over Ikuto. However, he fainted from pushing himself too hard on the mountain. Now, it was his turn to be nursed back to health. Days later, Ayane went to scold Machi for not preparing breakfast, and the girl said she was too hungry to move a muscle. Ayana had no choice but to prepare the meal herself, and while they ate, she told Machi that no one would marry her because she couldn't cook or clean. Machi took that statement to heart, and when Ayane started cackling like an evil witch, she unleashed a shikigami on her. She then walked out, declaring that she would begin training to become the waifu of the year. Her first stop was Chikage's house, and she asked her to teach her how to cook. The idea of having an apprentice appealed to Chikage, so she agreed and dismissed Panako from the kitchen. However, it took her only a few minutes to turn the kitchen upside down while searching for ingredients, so Panako scolded her. As she dragged Chikage away to begin cleaning, Machi snuck off to look for Rin. She asked if she could be her apprentice, and before Rin could respond, Mikoto tried to attack Machi with her shooting stars. She said Rin didn't need any more disciples, so Machi summoned bats to teach her a little lesson. Rin didn't even bat an eye and promised Machi that she would teach her all she knew. Hours later, Machi interrupted Ayana's bath to give her the bento box she had made, and Ayana was disappointed to find it empty. Machi didn't understand why until Ayana reminded her that she left home to learn how to cook. So the next day, when she returned to Rin, she asked for cooking lessons instead of carpentry lessons. Meanwhile, Ayane was in the pasture with Ikuto and Suzu, and she told them what Machi was doing. Ikuto thought it was nice that she wanted to improve herself, but said most people didn't know how to cook where he came from. When he mentioned they ate a lot of takeout, Ayana said she would love that kind of life, but Suzu was on team home-cooked meals. Her mother had always told her that cooking for her loved ones was a blessing, and Suzu always felt happy doing it. Ayana felt Suzu was just trying to score points with Ikuto, so she invited him to her place for dinner. And that was how an argument between her and Suzu broke out. Suddenly, an arrow flew out of nowhere, and when Ayane checked the message attached to it, she saw it was from Machi. She was inviting Ikuto over for dinner, and Suzu said it would be nice to try Machi's cooking. When they arrived at the stairs leading to the shrine, Rin suddenly emerged from the woods, looking like an old hag. She pleaded with them not to accept Machi's dinner invitation, as it would be their last meal. After she fainted, the trio tried to yeet, but Machi's Shikigami showed up and dragged them away. Machi then welcomed them and instructed them not to peek into the kitchen while she cooked, which only made them even more terrified. They couldn't even run away because a Shikigami was holding the door shut, so they were forced to listen to the horrifying sounds coming from the kitchen. Eventually, Machi served the meal, and no one was surprised to see most of it moving. The girls had Ikuto try the food first, and, to their surprise, he declared it delicious. Machi was very happy with his verdict, and when the others tasted it, they agreed. So she told them there was more, and said no one could leave until they finished it. Another day, Suzu woke up early to prepare cold tofu to celebrate Tonkatsu's birthday, which reminded Ikuto of someone, but he hid the picture from Suzu. Later, while they were trying to figure out how to keep the tofu from collapsing, Ayane came bearing maimed Daifuku. However, she and Suzu got into an argument, and Ayane ended up with her face in the tofu, which she shamelessly began eating. It was then that Suzu noticed Ikuto was gone, so she went out to look for him and found his notebook again. This time, she picked it up, and as she looked at the picture, Ayana appeared behind her and said the girl was definitely Ikuto's lover. She then told Suzu they needed to find Ikuto and rushed ahead. He wasn't that hard to find, but he did look sad, so Ayane suggested leaving him alone to mourn his lost love. Later, when they went to invite the chief to the party, she noticed Suzu looked sad, and Ayane told her it was because they had learned about Ikuto's lover. After she left, the old woman told Suzu that Ikuto might actually be missing his family and friends, not a lover, as Ayane believed. Rin and Yukino happened to hear this, and the two thought they could be the ones to make Ikuto feel better. Chikage also came up with the same plan while hiding in a tree. So when they barged into Suzu's house later, the girl was surprised, but they ignored her and began looking for Ikuto. Chikage found a note he'd left, saying he was going to the beach, and when Suzu saw that the picture was gone, she rushed to the beach. When she arrived, she witnessed Ikuto getting on a boat and quickly used some surprisingly strong seaweed to pull him back to shore. She then shook him, demanding to know if he had a death wish, and the boy weakly explained that he'd been trying to send a message in a bottle. When the others arrived, he asked if they were going to a cosplay event, but realized how wrong he was when they tried to riz him up. While trying to flee, he bumped into Kuma Kuma and was ambushed by the thirsty girls once again. Suzu rushed over to help him, and when the girls began arguing, Ikuto demanded to know what was going on. Suzu explained the situation regarding the photo to him, and he clarified that the girl was his sister. At this, everyone turned on Ayane since she'd spread the false info, but the girl claimed it wasn't her fault that they believed her story. Just then, Chikage called their attention to the pot that had been boiling, so Ikuto recruited the girls to help him. He'd been making nigiri, a tofu thickener, and the chief who showed up out of nowhere complimented Ikuto for not being completely useless. Ikuto said he'd learned it from his grandfather and figured Suzu hadn't used nigiri when making her tofu. Hearing that he wasn't homesick made them happy, so they offered to help make the new batch of tofu. When it was ready, Suzu brought Tonkatsu inside to begin the celebration, and the little piggy became emotional. After everyone went home, Ikuto and Suzu sat outside, and he told her that it was also his sister's birthday. The message in the bottle was his apology for breaking his promise to take her shopping, and Suzu felt sorry for him. She asked if he still wanted to go home, and he said he couldn't bear to leave her alone. Suzu then called out to the orca whale to take them out to sea, so that Ikuto could send his letter. To their surprise, the whirlpool helped push the bottle into the open sea, and the pair hugged in excitement. Ikuto then thanked Suzu, and they held hands like awkward lovers on a first date. A few nights later, someone broke into the shrine's kitchen to steal some onigiri, but ran away when Ayane showed up. The next day, she told her friends about it, and Rin confirmed that food items had been going missing lately. As everyone began speculating who the culprit was, Makshi walked out and became their suspect because she had some rice on her face. After she walked away, they began following her to confirm their suspicion, and Makshi kept giving them evidence against her because she snacked on everything she saw, including offerings. When they confronted her, she denied being the thief, but they didn't believe her, which made her depressed. However, she recovered quickly and stole away with Ikuto, so the others decided to put their detective skills to the test. After hours of gathering information, they deduced that Yukino's house was the next target and decided to set a trap. Later, While Ikuto and Suzu were scouting, they discovered a cucumber field where all the cucumbers had been eaten and wondered just what kind of thief they were dealing with. When nighttime finally came, the gang left some onigiri for the thief in 2 different locations and waited. When the thief showed up where Ayana was, she shot her paralyzing dart at the person, but they caught it, prompting Rin to use a rope to catch them. During the struggle, the person's mask came off, and they ran away to where Ikuto was. He tried to catch the person, but they gave him the slip. As the sun began rising the next day, a tired Ikuto and Suzu returned home to find the place ransacked. They also heard sounds coming from the bathroom and assumed the thief was still there. However, when Ikuto got there, he found a green-haired girl, and he passed out from blood loss. The girl also passed out, so when Suzu arrived, she was very confused. After things cooled down, the terrified girl introduced herself as Mei Mei. She said she and her friend had drifted there after their boat capsized, and since she was too shy to approach the villagers, she ended up stealing their food. When Suzu told her she was wrong for stealing, she sincerely apologized, but they wanted to know why she had left the cucumber field the way she had. Mei Mei swore she wasn't the one, but when she figured it might be her friend Tono, she started freaking out. This prompted Suzu to say that outsiders were weird, and Ikuto protested. Later, they took Mei Mei with them to try to find Tono, but when they saw Machi and Yukino, they instructed her to hide. Machi showed them the mask the thief had left behind and said they were trying to track down the culprit. Just then, Rin came running towards them, saying that Chikage's cucumber field had been hit. While checking the place out, Yukino's dog caught Mei Mei's scent, so Ikuto located her quickly and ran to the other side of the house. He warned her to be careful, but Mei said she was worried about Tano and began tearing up. Just then, Suzu came to tell them that they had found Tano. They followed the dog to the river, but then lost the scent again. While looking around for clues, Machi spotted Mei Mei's fake tree stump and pulled out her dart shooter. Ikuto and Suzu tried to stop her, but were surprised when she turned her attention to the water and fired a shot at Tono, who suddenly emerged from it. As everyone stared at the kappa, Mei Mei rushed to hug her friend, which only added to the confusion. However, Machi was still determined to punish them for making everyone suspect her, and would have unleashed all her shikigami on them if Ikuto hadn't intervened. He asked Machi to forgive them, and even the others pleaded on their behalf, so she agreed. The next day, after Ikuto and Suzu helped set up the watermill near their house for Mei Mei and Tono, they took them to visit their friends, starting with Rin, who gave Mei Mei some household items she had made. After leaving Rin's, they ran into Yukino, and Mei Mei immediately hid behind Ikuto. When he encouraged her to say hello, she put on a bear suit from God knows where and nearly scared everyone to death. Yukino ended up running away, and Ikuto scolded Mei Mei for not picking a better costume. As they continued walking, they met Chikage, and the girl stripped Mei Mei because she wanted to know more about her dress, which she'd read about in books. Meanwhile, Ayane had just learned about Mei Mei from Machi since she hadn't been at the river for the big reveal, so she decided to see what the girl was like. When she spotted her sitting by the river with Ikuto and Suzu, she immediately felt threatened because Mei Mei had her dream body. Unaware of her presence, Mei Mei and the others continued chatting, and Mei Mei admitted that she didn't think her shyness would allow her to live happily on the island. Ikuto and Suzu assured her that she would, but Mei believed it would only happen if she changed. Just then, Ayane popped up behind her, and Mei Mei went to hide inside her tree costume, which Ayane found very weird. However, Ikuto and Suzu helped her understand why and properly introduced her to Mei Mei since the girl had mistaken her for Machi. Ayane then told Mei Mei that she didn't have to change herself just to live on the island. According to her, Mei Mei needed self-love, and the others agreed. They also reminded Mei Mei that she'd traveled alone and befriended Tano without any help, making her realize that all hope wasn't lost. At the mention of Tano, Yana finally noticed her and ran away screaming that she hated kappas. Apparently, a kappa had attacked her in the past, so she was still traumatized. Everyone chased after her, and when Mei Mei saw she was headed for a cliff, she ran ahead and knocked Ayane down. Later on, they learned from Machi that there were no kappas on the island. She dressed up as one to scare Ayana, and the girl had no idea. Mei Mei and Tano were sad to hear that Tano's friends weren't there, but Rin and the others arrived to cheer them up. Moved by their actions, Mei Mei forgot about being shy and thanked them properly. Days later, the cat master had breakfast with Ikuto and Suzu, but told them he had to rush off to do some damage control because the Lord of the East was out to get revenge on the person who defeated him. The guy who took him down apparently lived in the West, and when the master began describing him, Ikuto realized it was Tano. What they didn't know was that the former Lord of the East had found Tano and was about to fight her. However, when he saw Mei Mei, he fell in love with her and declared he would make her his bride. Tano demanded that the panda return her friend, but he refused and tried to take her away. Enraged, Tono tried to attack him, but was taken down by the cat master. The panda was also taken down, but he didn't let go of Mei Mei, and when he regained consciousness, he tried to take her away again. The cat master reminded him that he was on another lord's territory, and even though the panda was visibly terrified, he claimed he was safe since the Lord of the West wasn't around. At this, the cat master began aura farming and demanded that he put Mei Mei down. The cowardly panda began shaking, but he still refused to put Mei Mei down and ran away with her. As he tried to escape Ikuto and the others, the former Lord of the North suddenly appeared before him and punched him. However, he revealed that his beef wasn't with the panda, as he'd only come to take the new Lord of the North back. Tano swore that she wasn't the one who defeated the Lord, and everyone, including Mei Mei, was surprised when the tiger pointed at her. The tiger assured them that he wasn't mistaken and recounted how he'd lost to her. Mei Mei had only been trying to get away when she accidentally knocked a boulder down, but the tiger refused to believe it was just a coincidence. Just then, they realized that the panda had run off with Mei Mei, so the tiger chased after him. He caught up with him in no time and sent him flying into the sea with one punch. Before he could take Mei Mei away, Ikuto and the others arrived and tried to convince him to let her go, so the tiger challenged him to a duel. The escalation was unexpected, but Ikuto was determined to see things through. He attempted to use kendo to win, but the tiger beat him up and pushed him back almost immediately. Suzu then picked up the makeshift kendo stick to fight in his place, but Ikuto wouldn't let her and continued the fight himself. He got beaten a lot, but he was persistent and kept coming back. Seeing that he was getting hurt a lot, Mei Mei cried out that she would relocate to the north, but Ikuto told her to have some faith in him. Impressed by his courage, the tiger vowed to end things with one punch, only to rip Mei Mei and Suzu's clothes. Ikuto's nosebleed then momentarily blinded the tiger, and the Lord of the West zoomed past Ikuto, telling him to attack between the tiger's legs, so he did. The tiger went down, and when he got back up, he accepted his defeat and left. Along the way, the Lord of the West approached the tiger and teased him about letting Ikuto win. The tiger feigned ignorance and accused the Lord of the West of selling him out, but the Lord of the West denied it. Meanwhile, Mei Mei was thanking Ikuto for saving her, and Suzu just watched them quietly. The next day, Panako went to wake Chikage, but when she refused to get up, Panako overturned her bed and screamed at her to clean up the room. Once Chikage got dressed, she tried to start cleaning, but tripped over some books and found a spell book. That night, she went about performing magic in the village. The following day, when Ikuto woke up, he was shocked to find that Suzu was now a demi-human cat, and he was a dog. As for Tonkatsu, he looked like a regular pig, while the chickens had become human. Confused as to whether they had swapped dimensions in their sleep, Ikuto and Suzu decided to head into the village. On the way, they ran into Yukino and Kuma Kuma, but Yukino was now a bear and Kuma Kuma a human. This made them realize that the whole village had been affected, and everyone's transformation shocked them. However, no one seemed to find it odd, and that just confused Ikuto and Suzu. They then decided to go ask Chikage, and were glad to see she was still human. While speaking to them, she let it slip that she was responsible for everyone's transformation and wasn't very happy that their transformations halted halfway. Ikuto didn't believe her, so she pulled Ayana's bird out of her hat and then tried for a rabbit. This time, it was Ayane who emerged, and she was pissed to learn that Chikage was behind everything. She hadn't transformed fully because she'd used Moxie as a shield, and now she wasn't even sure where she was. The next moment, a flying squirrel came out of nowhere and hit Ikuto in the face. When they looked closely, they saw it was Moxie. Ayane then tried to force Chikage to turn everyone back, but the girl used magic to evade her and said she wouldn't change them back. After she flew away on a broom, Ikuto began questioning the laws of physics, so Suzu and Ayana decided to join forces against Chikage. However, they still took Ikuto with them when they went to search Chikage's house, and he accidentally set a genie free. He refused to believe it was a genie, but when it began granting wishes, he tried to gaslight himself into denial. Suzu then wished for Chikage to be caught, so the genie set a trap outside using books. They didn't think it would work, but Chikage showed up a few seconds later and got caught. They then tied her up and demanded that she reverse, but she wished to be free, and the genie granted it. This left them with one wish, and everyone except Ikuto went crazy, trying to get the genie to grant their wish. In the end, it was Machi who suddenly showed up and got her wish granted, which pissed her off. However, Chikage recovered quickly and trapped all of them in a box so she could saw them in half. As she began with Ikuto, Panako returned and threw a rock at her for not having cleaned up her room. The spellbook received some damage, so all the spells Chikage had performed were reversed. Since Ikuto had passed out from shock, Suzu and Ayane took him home, and when he woke up, he was convinced it had all been a dream. The next day, as Ikuto and Suzu walked back home, they came across Mikoto's other sister, Shinobu, lying on the road, nearly passed out from hunger. They took her home, and while she tried to break Goku's eating record, she revealed that she had left to train for a day, got lost, and spent the last few months finding her way back. Suddenly, it dawned on her that she'd never seen Ikuto before. so Suzu introduced him to her. Almost immediately, Shinobu grew flustered and asked Ikuto to have a sword fight with her. Apparently, the Cat Master had spread word about his swordsmanship, and she wanted to test him out herself. The other lords had also testified to it, so nothing Ikuto said could convince Shinobu that they had exaggerated his skills. He turned her down, but Shinobu swore she wouldn't rest until she crossed blades with him. Because of that, she didn't go home and kept bugging him to spar against her, even while they slept. The next day, she went fishing with Ikuto and Suzu, and Ikuto tried to convince her to leave him alone, but his talk no jutsu didn't work. Suzu couldn't help but feel neglected, but she didn't say anything. That night, while Ikuto was in the bath, Shinobu joined him, and he almost bled to death. When Suzu came in and saw the scene, her anger grew, so she asked Shinobu whether she would leave if Ikuto agreed to spar with her. Shinobu said yes, so Suzu angrily told Ikuto that he had to accept the challenge, and he agreed. The next day, when Shinobu showed up for the duel, she wasn't dressed appropriately, thanks to Chikage, who claimed she thought the duel was an excuse for a date. Nevertheless, the duel went on as planned, and Ikuto noted that Shinobu was fast, but her swings were very random. Karaj, the rooster, said that with the way things were going, there wouldn't be a winner unless one of them did something the other couldn't predict. As though hearing him, Shinobu decided to use her ninja skills to her advantage, and Ikuto found himself fighting clones. When the real Shinobu finally moved to attack him, he managed to dodge and realized that he could now keep up with her speed. However, Shinobu suddenly tripped, and when he tried to catch her, he grabbed her plots instead, causing him to get a nosebleed. He immediately pulled back and began apologizing, but Shinobu surprised him by conceding defeat, so Ikuto was named the winner. A few days later, Ikuto spent the evening reading a book in Chikage's library and was surprised when she told him the author was from that island. She said no one knew the person's identity, which bummed him out, since the book was really good. Just then, Chikage's mother walked in, and as the introductions were underway, they heard Zeus flexing his powers. The woman urged Ikuto to hurry home to Suzu, who at that very moment had received an anonymous letter. The next day, it was revealed that Ikuto, Mei, and the others had also gotten the anonymous letter, inviting them to a place called the Tsukimi Pavilion. According to Suzu, it used to be a hot spring resort in the eastern forest, and when she mentioned that the owner, Sakuya, was a little weird, Mei grew worried. A while later, they arrived at the resort and were greeted by Sakuya, whose head suddenly fell off, and she reattached it as if nothing had happened. Apparently, she was a mechanical doll who had drifted to that island along with the other survivors, and when Ikuto asked why she was created, she admitted she didn't know. After she took them to their room, Suzu asked Ikuto to join her in the hot springs, but he refused, saying he would use the men's bath. To his surprise, Suzu revealed that the inn didn't have one, so he opted out entirely. Later, when Sakuya came to bring him tea and cakes, he asked about the anonymous letters, and she told him she wasn't the one who sent them out. She herself had received a letter informing her of their arrival. Elle and Ikuto grew suspicious. Just then, Chikage showed up and said they had a mystery on their hands. She then looked at the envelope and announced that the sender was the Phantom Beniyasha. Ikuto told her to get real, as the Phantom was a character in the book he had read the previous day, but Chikage maintained her stance. She said the book was actually a documentation of the Phantom's crimes from 18 years ago, and that the author had stopped writing it after the Phantom suddenly disappeared. This worried Ikuto, but Sakuya assured him that she wouldn't let any harm come to her guests. She then asked where the others were, and that was when Chikage remembered she'd come to inform them that the girls had passed out in the bath. After dinner, they were still feeling dizzy and hot, so Sakuya left to bring them some shaved ice. Chikage also left to get some air, but Ikuto couldn't stop worrying about the Phantom. When Suzu asked what the problem was, he told them everything he'd discussed with Chikage, but they dismissed it as a joke. Just then, they heard Chikage scream and rushed outside to check on her. She pointed into the dark forest, saying someone was there, so Sakuya equipped herself with her weapons. However, the intruder turned out to be Shinobu, who had gotten lost on her way to honor the anonymous invitation. After they all went back inside, Ikuto began to wonder if Chikage was the one who had actually sent the letters. However, there was no way to prove it, so he decided to think things over in the bath and left the room. Ayane immediately followed him, but when she snuck into the bathroom and touched him, a scary face turned to look at her, so she screamed. The others heard it and joked that she was playing tricks again, but Ikuto and Sakuya rushed out of another room and ran to the spot. Ikuto went in first, and when Sakuya arrived, she was shocked to see Ayane covered in blood. Fortunately, it was blood from Ikuto's nose, and when Ayane woke up, she attacked Ikuto for scaring her with a mask. Sakuya told her it was impossible as Ikuto was with her, but Ayane argued that she followed him to the bathroom. Suddenly, she began to itch all over, and the next moment, Beniyasha revealed himself and took credit for it. He also revealed that he had the antidote for Ayana's itching and told Ikuto that he could have it if he could catch him. They immediately chased after him, and Sakuya even fired her missiles, hoping to slow him down, but it was all in vain. Back at the inn, the girls wondered why Ikuto hadn't returned yet and began arguing over who would spend the night with him. Shikage told them they were acting desperate and said she had the perfect plan to help them. When asked what it was, she said she would address a letter to Ikuto asking him to go to the room of the person he wanted to spend the night with. The girls didn't think it was a good idea and pointed out that he might just ignore the letter, but Shikage assured them that he wouldn't. She then walked to the window with a smug smile on her face as the others began imagining themselves as Ikuto's lover. Beniyasha, who had been watching them, just chuckled and leapt off the tree. The girls then retired to their rooms to wait, and Shinobu got attacked by the massage chair in her room, causing her to scream. When Sakuya and Ikuto arrived, they found Chikage with her, and she claimed that Shinobu's scream had brought her there. Ikuto told her that Beniyasha was behind the attack, and after hearing what happened to Ayane, Chikage said no one was safe. Not long after this, they heard Mei scream and rushed to her room. They found her passed out with a white substance coating her face. When she woke up, she tried to make plot with Ikuto, and that was when Beniyasha appeared. He said the lotion he'd used on her was an aphrodisiac, and of course, he had the antidote. When he ran off, Ikuto left Mei in the care of Chikage and Sakuya and chased after Beniyasha, but the guy still escaped. While searching for him, Ikuto heard Rin scream and rushed to her room, only to find Mikoto harassing her. He quickly closed the door for health reasons and decided to search every room for Beniyasha. That didn't go well, as the rooms were occupied by the animals, who weren't happy with his intrusion. Just as he called it quits, Chikage showed up and said Sakuya had knocked Mei out. Suddenly, she claimed to have seen a shadow on the second floor, and when Ikuto rushed to the room, he found Suzu. However, that wasn't the real Ikuto, and just as he tried to trick Suzu, the real Ikuto arrived. Fake Ikuto then tried to convince Suzu that he was the real deal, but Ikuto was done playing games. Seeing his murderous intent, Beniyasha revealed himself and then escaped to the roof. Ikuto promptly followed him, but Beniyasha called him a fool and reminded him that he was afraid of heights. On cue, Ikuto began glitching, but he composed himself enough to try to attack Beniyasha. Sadly, his opponent wasn't the type to play fair, so he tossed the antidotes in the air, forcing Ikuto to scramble for them. Sakuya tried to catch him, but her hands fell off, and Ikuto landed on the ground. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt, and Beniyasha commended him for being so resilient, but then he flew away on a kite, promising Ikuto they would meet again. Ikuto chased after the kite, not realizing that Beniyasha was still on the roof. Shikage soon joined the masked man up there and complimented him on toying with Ikuto's head. It turned out that Beniyasha was Chikage's mother and the author of the Beniyasha series. She wanted to write a new book, and Chikage had assured her that Ikuto would make the best protagonist, so she came to test him. Days later, Machi accidentally unsealed a shape-shifting tanuki named Genju Maru. She tried to seal him back, but Genju Maru outsmarted her and buried her under giant acorns. During that time, Ikuto and Suzu were fishing, but they hadn't caught a single fish. Suzu said it probably wasn't their lucky day, but Ikuto refused to give up and doubled his efforts. By the time he was through, his bucket was almost full, and he bragged to Suzu that he was the best fisherman ever to live. Suzu didn't really care as she just wanted to eat her mame de fuku, but before she could, they turned to stone. Even Ikuto's fish turned to leaves, and that was when Machi approached them to explain that a tanuki demon had tricked them. When she mentioned that he could shapeshift, Ikuto laughed it off, so Machi pulled Tonkatsu out of her pocket. She then tried to reseal the fake one, but he jumped out of Suzu's arms, changed back into Genjumaru, and ran off again. Still, Ikuto refused to believe the tanuki was a demon and watched as the girls chased it. Once again, Genjumaru outsmarted Machi, causing her to fall into the river, so she decided to get serious. When they arrived in the village, Kuma, and Yukino approached them. However, they discovered that Yukino was actually Genjumaru, and after he transformed, he attacked Machi with oranges. He then ran off again and transformed into Mei, so Ikuto tricked him into revealing himself. In retaliation, Genjumaru dropped 2 large balls on Ikuto and Machi, which made her very angry, so when they later encountered Rin, she refused to believe she was the real Rin because she was dressed like a normal girl. It wasn't until she tried to undress her that she realized her mistake, but she still didn't apologize and even blamed Rin for going out of character. Just then, Genjumaru appeared on the roof of the house beside them and threw a large object at them. Thankfully, it was tofu, so Machi didn't get hurt, but her ego was bruised. So she didn't stop to think when they met Chikage, and she told them that Genjumaru had jumped into the well. After getting out of the well, she continued the search with Ikuto and Suzu, but found Ayane instead, so Machi bullied her into joining them. Shortly after that, they found Genjumaru, but he transformed into Shinobu, and he played his role very well. The group had no choice but to charge at both Shinobus and try to look at their belly buttons, and Ikuto got the real Shinobu, which earned him a nosebleed. Sadly, the others lost Genjumaru, and while they were resting later, Suzu realized that Ikuto wasn't Ikuto because he said it would be impossible to catch Genjumaru. Makshi immediately tied him to Ayane so he wouldn't escape again and then finally resealed him. A few moments later, Tonkastu found them and led them to where Ikuto lay unconscious. When he eventually woke up, he once again assumed the day's events had been a dream, so the sisters decided to mess with him. Sometime later, Yukino was heading home with Kuma Kuma and her dog when a bird suddenly spooked them. They didn't see it, but the feather that dropped glowed blue. The following day, while Suzu was by the river, Yukino found her and excitedly informed her that she'd seen the legendary blue bird. She even presented the feather as proof and pleaded with Suzu to join in her search for it. Suzu tried to use Ikuto as an excuse, but Yukino sent her rabbit friend to get him and had Kuma Kuma carry Suzu. When Ikuto heard about it, he said he couldn't go because he needed to gather firewood, so the rabbit offered to accompany him since Suzu wasn't coming back soon. A while later, Suzu and Yukino arrived at the spot where she'd spotted the bird, and Yukino asked the dog to help them sniff it out. What he found was a regular bird, but Yukino tried to befriend it, which spooked it. The group chased it without watching where they were going, and they fell into a deep crevice. Suzu couldn't attempt to climb out because she had hurt her leg, and Kuma Kuma was too big. Their only hope was that Ikuto would find them, but Yukino wasn't sure he would know where to look. At that time, Ikuto was already searching for them, and Kagame asked the other animals to help him. By nightfall, they still hadn't found them, but Suzu was optimistic that Ikuto would come. She even gave her companions the apples she had, and Yukino couldn't help but admire how strong Suzu was. Suddenly, it started to rain, and Ikuto was still very far from the crevice. However, he refused to give up, and as he ran around calling out Suzu's name, the blue bird suddenly revealed itself to him. Ikuto heard it say his name, so he began following it, and it led him to Suzu and the others. When he turned to thank the bird, he saw that it was gone, so he focused on rescuing his friends instead. Kagami also showed up with the other girls, and once everyone was safe, Rin built a fence around the crevice to avoid another incident. Everyone then left, and Suzu apologized to Ikuto for worrying him. He told her he didn't mind because they were family, which made Suzu cry. Since he didn't know how to comfort her, he offered to carry her home, and Suzu quietly got on his back. Days after the incident, Ikuto became the math teacher at the school, but he hadn't told Suzu yet. The girl hated studying, and he wasn't even sure how to convince her to attend classes. One evening after classes, Chikage gathered Ikuto and their friends in a class to discuss her plan to get Suzu to come to school. After assigning roles to everyone, Chikage told Ikuto that he would be in charge of luring Suzu. Ikuto wasn't entirely on board, as he felt it was wrong to force Suzu to do something she disliked, but Chikage insisted that the intervention was what Suzu needed. The next day, the plan was set in motion, and the usually dense Suzu sensed that something was amiss from the way everyone was acting. Ikuto also started acting strange, but Suzu didn't try to find out why. When they got to the road they usually followed to Rin's place, they saw a sign saying it was under construction, so they took the longer road. At this point, Suzu's suspicion was growing, but she kept quiet and continued walking. Soon, they reached the bridge and saw it was closed as well, so they continued walking until they came to a path where Yukino and the animals had dug holes. They took another detour and, after walking for a few minutes, fell into one of Chikage's traps and ended up at the school. When Suzu realized that everyone had skimmed to bring her there, she got mad and ran away. Ikuto immediately chased after her, but she was fast and managed to avoid being captured by Rin and the others. The chase lasted longer than Ikuto expected, but when he finally caught Suzu, he tickled her feet as punishment for making him do cardio. He then told her they had to return to school, but Suzu began hitting him, saying he was mean for trying to force her to study. She also thought the others were making fun of her, but Ikuto made her realize they were doing it for her own good. When they returned to school later, the girls apologized for tricking her, and Suzu promised to put more effort into her studies, which made them happy. Another day, while Suzu was on the beach, a message in a bottle washed ashore, so she grabbed it and rushed home. Ikuto was surprised when he read it and discovered it was a reply from his sister. She thanked him for reaching out to her, and revealed that she had gone out to sea to look for him and gotten lost too. Ikuto and Suzu immediately rushed to the beach, and Ikuto tried to row past the whirlpools, but failed. He then attempted to fly over the whirlpools on a kite and panicked once in the air because of his fear of heights. The others heard his screams, so they left what they were doing and rushed to the beach. By the time they arrived, he had crash-landed and passed out, so Suzu explained the situation to them. When he came to later, he was attached to a large slingshot, which Rin swore would help him get past the whirlpools, but after they launched him, a whirlwind sent him back, and that was when Yukino's bird informed them that the island's airspace had a lot of whirlwinds. Machi then suggested they go supernatural, but when they reached the shrine, she said the price was that Ikuto would marry her. Everyone told her off, and she would have stopped the ritual if Ikuto hadn't said she couldn't separate his soul from his body. The moment it began working, Ayane interrupted it and got punished for it. As a last resort, they went to Chikage's place to speak with the genie. Ikuto told them that he didn't believe in all that magic nonsense, but the girls said he had to do everything in his power to save his sister. After an unnecessary back and forth, he wished to be sent to his sister, but nothing came of it. When he demanded to know why, the genie revealed that he'd granted something they didn't even consider a wish. Ikuto then became depressed, and as the girls tried to cheer him up, Suzu spoke up. She said that if Ikuto left, he would never return, and then ran off because she felt she was being selfish. Ikuto went after her but ran into the chief, who offered to be his temporary counselor. Later, the old woman found Suzu at the beach, and after Suzu confided her worries to her, the old woman revealed that there was a way off the island. However, it was up to Suzu to decide whether she wanted Ikuto to know. Suzu then spent more time at the beach, and when she returned home, Ikuto apologized for not considering her feelings. Suzu said she understood, then shocked him by revealing there was a way off the island. They then went to see the chief, and she told them the legend of the sea dragon god who lived in a shrine on the small island next to theirs. The shrine had a key, but it was on the icy mountain, and getting to it wouldn't be easy. After they left the old woman, the two began the journey to the mountain to get the key. However, they didn't notice that the others were following them or that the others had set a trap to prevent them from going up the mountain. The only good part was that Rin had put signs in the maze to help them, much to Chikage's annoyance. She then stormed off to the exit, where she had set up another trap in case Suzu and Ikuto made it there. Once she set it off, a large boulder rolled through the maze, leveling everything in its path, including the girls who had gone into it. As Ikuto and Suzu ran for their lives, the Lord of the North showed up and punched it back to where it came from. However, when he learned they were heading to get the key to the sea dragon god's shrine, he told them he couldn't let them through. They tried to reason with him, but he refused and tried to attack them, so they asked what the issue was. The tiger then revealed that the four island lords' job was to protect the island's guardian, the sea dragon god. Ikuto then realized they would have to defeat the four lords to get the key. When the tiger charged at them, Mei suddenly appeared and tripped him, but that didn't stop him from trying to hurt Ikuto. Seeing this, Mei and Tano decided to fight him in Ikuto's place, and by the miracle of accidents, they won. Ikuto and Suzu then moved on and ran into the Lord of the East, but Shinobu showed up and took over because she thought it looked like fun. This allowed the two to proceed, but then they encountered the Cat Master, so Suzu decided to fight him. The Cat Master engaged her for a few seconds, but then she realized that she had been fighting a cat disguised as her master. In that same moment, more cats disguised as her master popped up, so Suzu began trying to find the real one. In the end, it was Ikuto who found him because he had two tails. The Cat Master then conceded defeat and allowed them to head to the mountain. The two were worried because they didn't know who the Lord of the West was, but they kept going and finally reached the small shrine on the mountain. The moment they moved to grab the key, the Lord of the West showed up and grabbed it. To their surprise, it was Courage, and he invited Ikuto to try to defeat him. Ikuto instructed Suzu to stand back and charge at Courage with his kendo sword, but his skills were no match for the rooster. Still, he kept fighting, and just as Courage tried to finish Ikuto off, Suzu stepped in and took the hit. Thankfully, she wasn't harmed, but she pleaded with Ikuto to back down, as she didn't want him to get hurt. Ikuto assured her he would be fine, then picked up his sword to challenge Courage again. This time, when the rooster attacked, he was prepared and managed to retrieve the key. A while later, he and Suzu arrived at the sea dragon god's shrine, without even noticing that Ayana was following them. She was very determined to stop them and swam to the bottom of the water to speak to the sea dragon. She almost lost her life and quickly grabbed what she thought was a vine but was actually the sea god's whiskers. When it broke off, she panicked and swam back to the surface. At the same time, the cave began shaking, so everyone ran out to avoid getting buried alive. Ayana didn't realize she was still holding the whisker until Suzu asked what it was, and they were shocked when she told them who it belonged to. Later, she met with the others, and they expressed happiness that Ikuto wouldn't be able to leave the island. When Ayane started laughing, the chief showed up and asked them to think about what was best for Ikuto, and not themselves. At this, they all went silent until Machi suddenly appeared and told them that Ikuto was going out to sea because her Shikigami had shown it to her. They immediately rushed to try to stop him, but Suzu blocked their path, so the old woman asked if she was okay with Ikuto leaving or even getting hurt. At this, Suzu ran into the water, and as she began swimming towards him, the whale came to give her a lift. She then began calling out to Ikuto, and when he turned, she begged him not to go because she didn't want to be separated from him. Ikuto tried to go to her, but he got pulled into a whirlpool, prompting her to dive in after him. The current was so strong that it sent her back to land, but Ikuto wasn't with her. The old woman said the sea dragon god was angry, and everyone turned to look at Ayane, who claimed she was innocent. Suzu ignored them and jumped on the whale's back before anyone could stop her. It helped her reach a safe spot where she could dive underwater, and she swam so far down that she almost got swept away by the waves. Thankfully, she was inside the cave, and her friends managed to pull her out. They then told her they were going to help her, and, as the culprit, Ayane dove into the water to return the sea dragon's whiskers. Once it was reattached, the sea dragon swam away, so the girls pulled Ayane out of the water. They then began praying, asking the sea god to protect Ikuto. Outside, the chief and the lord saw a bright light shining from the sea and knew the sea god was on the move. Meanwhile, Machi was fiddling with another voodoo doll, which forced Ikuto to wake up and swim to the surface. To his surprise, he saw his sister, Misaki, on a boat with some men. But what shocked him the most was that Misaki's experience was very similar to his, and she'd been living on an island with only men. Nevertheless, he was glad that she was fine, but he told her that he couldn't go with her. Misaki asked if he had someone waiting for him, and he answered that he did, so the men tossed him a lifeboat and began rowing back to their island. Ikuto didn't even say goodbye to Miskai, and once he got on the boat, he began rowing with all his might, trying to get back to his island. The next morning, Tonkatsu found him passed out on the beach, which surprised Suzu. When Ikuto opened his eyes, she hugged him and said she was happy that he'd returned to her. That's all for today, but first, how do you think Misaki's life is on the other island, and would the siblings ever see each other again? If you got this far, comment Simp King. Also, don't forget to check out this next video.